Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so pleased that you are here to join Kevin, Kan and I in this webinar, which is titled Better Conversations in 2021. While we're waiting just for everybody to sign on and make sure that they've got themselves organised, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping with you, please. So the first thing is, let's make sure that you've got a pen and paper. Grab some water, coffee, glass of wine, whatever it is that takes your fancy at 7:30 at night. It is in Australia here. Say hi on your chat. You'll see the chat down in your panel on the right-hand side of your screen there. Say hi down there and we'll give you a hoi back. And also, a reminder that we will take all of your questions at the end of the presentation. So there is actually a line there or a drop down where you can write questions in if that's what you'd like to do. So finally, I see that a few more people are joining in here, which is awesome. Thank you. Oh, welcome. I see there's Susan here, there's Sarah, there's Vicky, Roger. I see that we've got Murray, we've got Eloise. That's awesome. We've got Paul. We've got I see we've got Paula there. Hi, Paula. How you doing? We've also got Catherine there. We've got John, and we've got another Susan. Okay, there's too many now joining in for me to be able to really pay a lot of attention to them. What I want to say to you is this. It's really important you've taken the time to register for this webinar. You're here. What I'd love it is if you gave yourself the gift of being fully present. So switch off your phone, switch off your mobile, turn off some of those other pages in your search engine. Grab your pen and paper and make sure that you're going to pay attention and take some notes, because there's an awful lot of really awesome, really deep information that Kevin and I are going to share with you today. So what a year 2020 was. And there's still this uncertainty about 2021. Our fellow presenter, or my fellow presenter, Kevin Kan, is in Singapore. Kevin, can you hear me? You're there?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, Kevin and I were having a conversation just before we started this webinar, and what is happening in Singapore right now is that they're just in the process of going into another round of lockdowns, and so this uncertainty is going to stay with us for a little bit longer. So where we want to start the webinar today with is identifying exactly why this webinar is for you. It's for you if you often leave conversations wondering exactly what happened and you're left confused by the unpredictable ways that other people behave. You might find yourself struggling to successfully manage those difficult conversations, either avoiding them completely, minimizing them, or going in way too hard because you're feeling uncomfortable about it. You may well be realizing that some people just don't understand why you or how you communicate the way you do, and that's impacting on your relationship with them. And when you think about it, what all of these issues have in common is you. Maybe you'd like to have a better understanding of how to be better and why, so that you can be better. Perhaps you're searching missing link that you need to improve your negotiation or your sales skills. Maybe you do poorly, or you've got this perception that you have really poor communication skills, and you believe that your current level is holding you back from career opportunities. Perhaps you figure that it's time that you look at a different approach to things. Hey, 2021, whole new way of doing things, whole new approach to your life and your career and your relationship And you know that better communication is one of the major keys to this because things haven't been going well up to this point. And maybe you recognize that we're already, well, we're way past 10 weeks into 2021, and you need to get started to make the absolute of the remainder of the year. Perhaps you've been a bit lazy about communication in 2021 and you realize that it's time for you to take some action. Kevin and I are here and we're your facilitators. And before we get started on what we're going to talk about, I'd like to introduce us. So my name, for those of you who don't know me, is Beth Berghan. I'm a life and a business success coach and a leadership consultant. And my goal is really to be guiding clients from where they are right now to where they are going to, where their new normal is, where their next is, and the whole way or the whole time that we're doing this, making sure that that transformation is safe for them. Kevin.
Hi, Beth. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. My name is Kevin Kan. I'm a professional coach specializing in executive and leadership coaching. So I've been working in multinational organizations for over 30 years now, and I've been lucky enough to work in various areas, strategy, business development, service delivery, product development, marketing, distribution, customer experience, and also talent development. So it's been wonderful working in all these organizations because it allows me to work closely with managers and leaders and help them get their careers off and running, or to help them maximize their potential. So I'm happy to be here and I look forward to seeing you at the end of the session. Beth.
Thank you, Kevin. So I started out as a teacher and an educator in high schools and TAFE, working with lots of different groups with this focus on helping people to reach their potential. Along the way, I've owned and operated a number of successful small businesses. And because I've done both that and worked in the private and the corporate sector, it gives me this unique perspective in terms of being able to work across those two areas. Right now, I'm very excited about the fact that I work as a coach and a consultant with both national and international clients. I've always been seriously passionate about my own self-development and passionate about creating circumstances that are fun for my clients but have that sort of uncomfortable fun aspect to them. Because I bring that unique perspective of private enterprise and corporate, it means that I can look at things and help my clients to look at things from those different perspectives. And one of the things that my clients often come back to me with is that they find themselves in a variety of situations thinking, I wonder what Beth would say. So I've always been passionate about challenging myself and helping and influencing and empowering others to reach their fullest potential. So I love the work that I do. And I particularly also enjoy doing these kinds of webinars where I get the opportunity to collaborate with people like Kevin, who's both my friend and my colleague. So before we get started, let's have a bit of a look about what we're actually going to be covering today. There are three key areas. And the first one is we're going to look at a bit of an overview of communication. So this is a reminder about what it is, how it works, and some tips and strategies in here that you can use. And then we're going to cover some understanding of different communication styles, because what we believe is that to understand actually brings us clarity. We'll look at some more strategies and tools, some examples of different situations, and exactly how we're going to be able to deal with those. So Kevin and I are going to be communicating with you at different times throughout the webinar. And as I said to you, just make sure that you pop any questions that you've got in the questions panel. If there are things that we can answer during the webinar, we will, but otherwise we'll save all of those up and answer them at the end. So Kevin,
Great. So let's just do a quick overview as to why we communicate. So it's always great to take a step back and have a look at why do we want to have communication skills? Well, sometimes we need to share information. We need to let people know, we need to let family know, we need to let clients know, we need to let people know about the information that we have that is important to them or information that they need. Sometimes we broaden our perspectives by having conversations, asking questions, and commenting, expressing our opinions. And that's so important if you're in the corporate world because people need to know that you actually exist. So being able to communicate and express your opinion is super important so that leaders at a higher level and the executives, they know that you exist and you have potential. It's important also to communicate so that we can develop social relationships, so that we can have friends, we can have a circle of trusted people, we can have people that we go to. Just like in Grey's Anatomy, Meredith has who? Christina Yang as her go-to person. So we need to communicate because we need to be able to ask people for help. We need to be able to express our wants and our needs. So that's an important reason why we communicate as humans. But we should always take a step back and have a look at why is it that we communicate? And especially during the pandemic, have we gotten lazy? Have we gotten lazy as we do different forms of communication? Are we now focused more on text rather than face to face? Are we more reliant now on Zoom and Skype rather than being face to face? And if you have a look at this photo here, it's a Zoom meeting that's taking place. And you've got people with their cameras off. You've also got one person who's actually looking at something else rather than looking at the camera or looking at the screen. And people just aren't engaged. Have you lost your focus? How do you become relevant or remain relevant to your audience so that they continue to pay attention? Are you losing the audience? And it's also important not only just to have verbal skills, but it's also important to have the non-verbal skills as well. And that includes body language. That's why it's so important that in the face of the global pandemic, where things are not face-to-face, where we have to do things online, it's important to be able to read body language whilst you're doing video. So when you're doing video conferencing on Skype or Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever platform that you're using, it's important to be able to look into the camera so that you can see what the person you are talking to, what they're doing, how they're reacting, and just looking at the body language. We need communication because we need to persuade people. Communication is about influencing and trying to let others know our opinions and also trying to influence them to the way that we think. We want someone to do something for us. And it's a little bit like a politician. So when you have the politicians asking for your vote, they're urging their audience to vote for them. They're trying to persuade them. They're trying to get them to understand what they stand for and what they're going to do for them. It's also like a mother who's trying to pacify or calm their child. So one way of communicating for children or baby is to pat them. So physical touch is also a form of communication as well. Or it could be visual. So if you're an advertiser trying to go and sell a new fashion line, so you're going to dress up a model. So the model in the window store will have a new dress, and that's a form of communicating as well. It's showing you the new style, it's asking you to look at the color, it's asking you to look at the cut, and it's telling you, you need to buy me. So we get a lot of things done through communication. There's a lot of persuasion, there's a lot of influence, and there's ways of letting people know our desires and our wants. But it's also trying to convince you to come and buy or come and have a conversation as well. Beth.
Thanks, Kevin. So if what we do is we come back and we have a look at what types of communication there are that we might be able to use in order to give or to provide information. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview here. I'm not looking at the science of it. I'm just giving you this kind of brief model so that you get an understanding of the different types. So the first one is one-way communication. Now, this is when it's quite directive. You're not expecting a response. You're simply directing people, giving them the information in one go. They hear it, they make of it what they choose to. And this can be, would largely be spoken, but it could also be in the form of written communication where a directive comes out from someone higher up in your organisation, or there's an expectation that clearly this is what you do. You may or may not be invited to ask questions. The second, another way, is two-way communication. So this is where most of our communication happens. And basically what we're doing is we're taking turns. We speak, we listen, we seek some clarity. We speak, we listen, we seek some clarity. And the idea is that we share it, and by seeking the clarity, we're getting our message across more clearly. There's also the difference between written and verbal communication. Now, obviously, these take quite different approaches. The sorts of words that we might use, the fact that with our verbal language, there's the whole aspect of non-verbal language, the way that we move our eyebrows, or where our head is, or the things that we do with our hands or our body while we're speaking. One of the things that can happen a lot is that when we're writing communication, it can be really easy to for people to misinterpret the message, particularly now that there's lots more texting going on, or that, you know, your Twitter feed where you've got a certain number of characters. It can be really easy for that to be misunderstood. So whatever type of communication, whether it's one way or two way, whether it's written or verbal, you need to be thinking about the approach that you want to take, because a different approach will be needed for each of those. The next area I'd like to look at is reacting as opposed to responding. Now, we communicate, as I said, in order to give or to provide provide information. We can provide a lot of information by reacting, which is very emotional. So this is about the emotive reaction versus a much more measured response. Now, what happens with all of these different forms of communication that we're looking at here is that there is this running interference, or what I refer to as a static, you know. And the reason I call it static is because if we can't quite get on the right radio station, there's a static that prevents us from hearing properly. And it's that static that gets in the way. And what that static is it's all about the beliefs and the experiences that each individual brings to the communication. So it could be cultural, it might be an age bias, it could be gender, it might be our different beliefs that we were raised with, what our values are, our education, our life experiences, the kind of work that we've done. And on top of that is layered our emotional state. So the key that I want to get across to you here is that we actually need to be aware that we've got a lot of different approaches that we can take. And depending on our role in an organization or our role in the communication, what we would say to a loved one is very different from what we might say in the work environment in terms of the words that we're using. The message may be similar in terms of getting something clearly across to them. So the key here is really knowing your audience. We also communicate seeking information. And what I'd like to remind you of here is that there's a real difference between open and closed questions. If what we're looking to do is to get information from someone, then we need to be focused more on asking open questions than on closed questions. So let me just quickly remind you of what the differences are there. Closed questions are the sorts of questions where we might get a one-word answer, like a yes, a no, or a maybe. So it might be something like, do you have a good day? And someone will go either yes, no, or yeah. You actually then will need to ask more questions to get more information. And that can, that over questioning with closed questions can lead to a shutdown in the communication. Whereas if you ask an open question, it seeks more information because of the wording that you use in the question and the message that you're sending to the person that you're communicating with. So it might be what's happening here, or what was the best thing that you did today at work, or what did you enjoy most about your day at school today, or how is this impacting you, or how is this whatever challenging for you right now, or help me understand which parts of this you're feeling really confident about and which parts you're a bit uncertain about. So there's some very simple examples of open and closed questions for you. And it's, if you, particularly if you're in a leadership role, it's useful for you to remember to ask those open questions. If you are not in a leadership role, it's also important to ask open questions when you're getting clarity, or when you're seeking clarity about a task that you've been given. So when we ask for clarity, ask a short, clear question. You're much better to ask 4 or 5 short, clear questions than you are to ask a really large, convoluted one, so that by the time you get to the end of it, both you and whoever you're speaking to are confused by what you want to ask. So break your question down to get clarity about a number of different things. The other thing that you need to notice when you're communicating, seeking information, is to check to see if there's a congruence between the non-verbal and the verbal communication. So a congruence means that they are reflecting each other. So what the words are reflecting, or what the words are saying, are reflected by the way the person's face looks, if it's positive verbal, you want to be able to see positive non-verbal, because otherwise there may be some concerns about whether that person is being honest with you or not. The next thing I want to talk about is that we communicate to express our emotions. And as we can see from this picture here on the slide, there's lots of different emotions, and we communicate to share or to express and share our emotions through our body language. So watch and learn. As I said before, we're looking for that congruence, and we want that congruence to be the most obvious thing of all. For example, if there's a bit of a nervous tick, or someone keeps on drumming one of their legs, then obviously there's something that they're a bit nervous about. There's all sorts of gestures and words and facial expressions that we use in order to express our emotions. And what we can see if we look at this slide is that most all of you who are on the call today, doesn't matter what your cultural background is or what kind of work you do, you'd be able to look at that and get an idea of pretty closely of the emotions that that person is expressing through the gestures and the facial expressions. So remember that there will be all sorts of different things, and that these may be impacted, they may have cultural impacts, and they may also be age relevant. So what we think is cool for our particular age, or what we think is accepted for one age group or one culture, doesn't necessarily flow into others. We also can be looking for as people communicate to express their emotions, we can also be looking for positive, negative, and non-committal language. The words need to match what they're saying. So make sure that again that those words are matching the verbal and non-verbal, but also make sure that you are hearing that language, so that you can reflect back to them about their emotions if needs be. Now, the downside of all of this is that some people overuse their emotions or the expression of their emotions. They can be overused, and they can also be used to manipulate the situation. You know, we've all heard that saying about crying wolf, and some people can overuse or use tears and or anger to manipulate a situation. Or the other one is that often we know someone who's a bit passive aggressive. You know, there's always people who are the drama people. They over dramatize every single thing, and you kind of go, oh, I want out. But there are also those who will use passive aggressive, where you really clearly get the message that they're unhappy because of their body language, because there's no congruence, but they're certainly not going to tell you that. So again, the final reminder is to look for that congruence between verbal and non-verbal. And so a really good thing for you to understand here is that fear, I want you to remember this, that fear and excitement are exactly the same energy. They're exactly the same energy. So it really all comes down to how you label it. And I talk to my clients at various stages of my coaching with them about being happy scared, which is that you know, like yes, I'm really afraid about this, but I'm also very excited. And it's all about how you actually label it. So to move on to the second point, there are many different tools that we can use to understand different communication styles. And there are lots of different tools that people use to identify their individual styles. And you may be familiar with some of these. It's things like Myers-Briggs, 16 personalities, the Big Five, the Enneagram type, Hogan or Clifton Strengths, and there's also extended disc. Now, because Kevin and I are both in extended disc consultants, we're going to base this next section around this. We're going to use their 4 preferred behaviors to highlight the differences. And so and what you'll notice is that as Kevin and I are sharing these with you, we have quite different personalities. It doesn't mean that you can't work together. It means that with greater awareness of each other's preferred style, you're going to be able to better communicate in a way that the other person understands, so you can adapt your own styles a little bit. So you've got to deal with me for another couple of slides, and then you'll be back to Kevin's dulcet tones, which is so easy to listen to. So the D in the disc stands for dominance. And this is all about active and task focused people. So they're often seen as being quite demanding, controlling, independent, wanting to get stuff done quite quickly and decisively, and can want results. You know, these people are quite results driven, and to others they can appear quite impatient. They don't want to spend a lot of time on all the fluffy stuff that sits around the edge. They want to actually be able to get on with it and actually be getting stuff done. And what we see is that they're perceived, they're often in the hurry, they're often may be seen to be blunt, they may talk to many people at the same time and be holding a number of different conversations, wanting to know, what's the bottom line, how's this going to benefit me, and can become irritated quite easily, and as I said before, quite impatient. And what we've got here is some celebrity examples for you. If we think about someone like Simon Cowell, who we often see being a judge on a range of different TV programs, quite blunt, quite outspoken, hurry up, let's get on with it. And you will be able to apply some of that thinking to those other celebrity examples there. Second behavior in the DISC profile is I, which stands for influence. Now, these people are much more social. They love the attention. They're open and friendly. They talk a lot more. They're animated. They're waving around their hands. They often talk more than they listen. They're energetic. They can appear quite disorganized, but actually many of them are very organized. They can jump all over the place. Their mind goes from task to task. And as a result, they can overlook some of the details. So these people quite like to have someone following behind, helping them to make sure they stay on track. They're less aware of personal space, so they'll want to get quite close to you. And they can be much more focused on feelings rather than focusing on the details and the hard facts. So the sort of people that sit in there are people like, Will Smith, Robin Williams, Ellen DeGeneres, people who are seen to be open and friendly and wanting to communicate with people, positive and optimistic, but not necessarily dragging you down into the detail. What we all knew about Bill Clinton, for example, was that he was very charismatic, but didn't necessarily talk through the hard facts with people. So the next one is over to you, Kevin.
So the third style is steadiness, the S style. So this person actually likes to listen. So this is a person who probably will be able to be more calm, listens to things, analyzes things rather than speak. So they're reliable people, they're more steady, and they probably are looking for people that have direction or want direction and details. So details are important to these people. They're very easygoing and they're very calm, and they probably are the ones that are probably slower to make decisions. So they will be asking, let me think about it. So they will ponder more before making decisions. They will like to have information. They will like to ask other people for their opinions before they make a decision. So they may be seen to be slower at decision making. They like their own personal space. So don't get too close to them because they would like to think about their spaces that they have and what they want to do. They may have strong opinions, but they don't necessarily express it vocally. And some people that are like this could be examples of Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, Halle Berry, and maybe even David Beckham. So the last style, Beth?
Yes, sorry. There you
Is the
go.
C style, the correctness. So for those of you that have done Myers-Briggs, this is probably closest to the J, if you have a J in your Myers-Briggs assessment. So these people are really, really about justice, correctness. They are probably perfectionists. They're quiet, very similar to the S style. They will listen to things. They're polite in a very diplomatical way. They're very, very analytical, and they want detail. They want evidence. So the thing here is that these are the people that will spend time to look at all the details and ask lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. So they will be people that want to store knowledge, they want to learn new things, and they're very, very detailed on specifications, which is going to be important. They don't necessarily express disagreement easily, and they want to be well prepared. So these are the people that will always be doing their homework. They don't like to be seen to be unprepared or not ready. And sometimes they may be critical, but they're critical based on facts and evidence. They like having a factual conversation. So some celebrity examples of this include Bill Gates, and definitely Mr. Spock from Star Trek. That is a definite correctness or style candidate. Beth.
Thank you, Kevin. So let's explore this and have a bit of a think about what your likely style might be. So it's about looking at, what are some strategies or tools that you might be able to use, given that what we've just identified is that there are 4 quite different styles. And we can see, what we tried to do is to highlight those differences for you, which is why we've come back to using those 4 DISC preferred behaviors. So it's important to have a look at the stress levels that people are working under, because the stress level, which is contributed to by insecurity and our frustration and our workload, all of those kinds of things are going to impact on the way that someone is communicating. It's also, what can be wrapped around that is, if there's uncertainty in the role that someone is doing or in their relationship, then they're going to be communicating under or from underneath that uncertainty. And that may show itself as some kind of fear, with some kind of lack of confidence. And fear often leads to anger. If people are feeling uncertain, then they can get negative and quite angry pretty quickly. Check to see whether someone is being pressured to change or to do things differently. Now, there's a real difference between talking about change and adopting a new way of doing something than there is to someone being forced to change when it doesn't make any sense to them. So one of the things that we need to do when we're communicating with others is understanding that each of these people are going to deal, each of these different personality types are going to deal with change or pressure quite differently. Come back and have a look at that verbal language. What are the words that are being used? What words are you using? And think about the different kind of words and how they're going to be heard. There are many different ways of saying the same thing. And in a leadership role, in a role where you're communicating with others and wanting to have those better conversations, it's worth your while to be thinking through, what is the language that I want to be using here? Are there some words that I should be including? Are there some words that are more emotional that it might be better for me to leave out? It's also important to consider your decision-making style, or the decision-making style of whoever you're talking to. Some of us are quick. Some of us may be slow and more thorough. And what we know is that some people may never make a decision. There's nothing more frustrating, in particularly, well, I was going to say in a work situation, but I guess both in our work and personal life, you want people to make a decision. Otherwise, human nature is that we will step in and make it for them. So it's important to encourage people and bring anybody you're communicating with to a point where they feel confident about making a decision, and they've got the kind of information that they need to make that decision confidently. And one of the things that we talked about with each of the personality types was around the sort of level of information that people need to feel comfortable with. So think about how much are they going to need to be able to make the decision. It's also important that we listen for understanding. Now, very often what happens with communication is that we're so busy thinking about what we're going to say back that we forget to listen to all of those cues, those nonverbal cues, or those cues in the words that people are using to help us to actually understand the message that they're getting through to us. Remember that just because we are talking does not mean that we are able to get our message across clearly. There are many different skills that we need to be able to communicate really well. Some more strategies and tools that you can use is to ask for clarification questions. And as we said before, they're open questions, not closed ones. And a great strategy for asking those clarification questions is a technique called paraphrasing, where what you're doing is feeding back to whoever you're talking to in using different language, using your own words. You're feeding back what they've said, starting with something like, so to be really clear, what you said was blah, blah, blah. And they'll tell you whether that was true or not. Another way of that you can start that kind of conversation is to say, so help me confirm that this is what you're thinking. And so you're asking them to listen to what you're saying to confirm that you've got it right. Or another one is so what I heard you say is this. Now, what I heard you say is quite a good one to use, but a lot of people get really put off with that. It can be a bit overused, so be careful about that. It's also really important, I believe, to acknowledge when you don't know the answer. Now, I can remember one team that I was working with, the person I had was leading a team of over 300 people, and the person higher up from me just couldn't understand why I would say, well, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out for you. And they believed that that was a weakness that you were showing when you showed people that you don't know. It's been my experience, and I know that Kevin has the same belief around this, that if you acknowledge that you don't know the answer, it actually builds relationships. It shows your authenticity. It shows that you are vulnerable. And it also demonstrates quite clearly that you will follow up when you get back to people. I learned this lesson very young. I remember when I was a student teacher, and this was way before the days of the internet. I remember a student asking me why milk was white if cows eat green grass. Now, it's a really complex thing about how many stomachs they have, but obviously I could have made something up on the spot. I chose not to, and it was really a turning point for me. This capacity to acknowledge that you don't know the answer is going to show that authenticity and build those relationships. It's also important to ask for feedback. So when you're doing a task for people, particularly if someone is, if you're being directed specific tasks all the time, ask how could we have done this better to meet your requirements, especially if you hand it back and they change it or they've changed their mind and they want something different. Ask what could we do better next time? Because the only way that you're going to help them to understand some of the frustration that you're experiencing is by asking them what you can be doing as an individual or as a team to make sure that you are meeting their requirements. It's important, we keep talking about this, it's important to use language and a style and a level of emotion to suit the situation. So it's about taking your relationship into account. It's avoiding those kind of hooks where people say something, that whole red herring thing. People say something in an emotive way, they chuck out a comment, you attach a meaning to it that may not be anywhere near what they meant, and you go off on a completely different tangent. Some people are awesome at doing that so that you get sidetracked. So look out for that. Ask for time out if things get heated. Be brief and be really clear in difficult conversations. And also when you're disciplining children, you don't need to share 150 different reasons why the behavior isn't okay. Be really brief, clear, and be very clear about what you would like the behavior to be, rather than just always going on about what's not okay. You need to be comfortable with silence. I talk to my clients all the time about celebrating the silence. It's important that when you ask a question, you have or you take the time and you discipline yourself enough to wait and give them time to respond. And I call this celebrating that silence, because, you know, you want to have a bit of a party going on in your head so that you don't feel really awkward and fill the silence with something. Give them time to answer the question. And finally here, it's really important that you let go of the need to be right now. Now, when we get locked into this thing about being right now, it's usually because there's a lot of emotion invested in the conversation. We might be wanting to prove a point to someone. We might be wanting to push something because there's a lot of emotion and we're up for a bit of an argument. So it's you don't have to be right now, and often you'll find that if you can step away from that, you'll get a new kind of an insight into whoever you're talking to, because you're managing your own emotions and your own need to be right and letting them step forward. So I hope you can take something from those strategies and tools. So Kevin, we're going across to you now for some more information.
So let's have a look at, once you know what kind of style people are, or your team members or family members are, how you're going to communicate with them. So if you have a person who is a D style, you basically need to be very, very direct, because they are not going to listen. They don't have the time to listen, nor do they want to listen. So they're very, very impatient in listening. So sometimes you just have to be direct, or sometimes people just say be blunt with them, just so that you can get the information across to them as much as possible, because they will want to talk over you. If you have a person who is I style, then what you want to do is to be continuing providing feedback so that they can understand where they're going well, that they are being influenced, that they are getting their message across. So what we want to do is to be able to engage them, because they're an influence style. You need to be able to listen more, because they want to talk to you, they want to tell you, they want to sell you. So they won't have a lot of detail. So asking them lots of information about facts, that's really going to drive them up the wall. So you want to listen to them so that they can get the message across through to you. If you're a steady, if you have a person that you're talking to who is S style, or who is steadiness, then basically they want to be talked to in a calm manner. And they want you to do more of the talking, because they will want to listen to you. So they want to absorb information from you. They want to create or have an area of trust, so that they can be sure that the information that you're giving them is going to be the right information. And they'll prefer one-on-one rather than group settings, so that they can feel calm and they can create and build trust. So if you're a C style person, or a person that has correctedness, then you need to give them as much detail as possible, because they are after facts and evidence. So they are the people that will make decisions based on facts. So you'll need to be able to give them what they need. They'll be extremely diplomatic, so you need to be respectful of them as well. And where possible, give them PowerPoint slides or things that are in writing so that they can go through and reflect and refer back to the information that you've given them. So they are also quiet. They're also very reserved. So don't talk too loudly with them. And they will sometimes ask you questions, but their questions or critique will be based on facts. So whatever you've told them, they may recite them back to you when they're asking questions. So with all that information, once you know your disc style or your preferred way of speaking, you will get a report as a part of the assessment. And the assessment will tell you what your natural communication style is and where sometimes you may need to adjust. So sometimes people may be S and C. So in the graph there is a high S and a high C. That's very like me because I have a high S and a high C. And there is sometimes a perceived need to adjust. So sometimes we may need to adjust down our S to meet with the person that we're speaking to, or with clients or with family members, so that we can go through and have a productive conversation, or to adjust the way that people perceive us. Because remember, when people have an opinion of us or how they see our personal branding, that is a perception. So when you're not in the room, how do people talk about you? What do they say about you? So it's important to know how our personalities, the way we communicate, how that is being perceived by others as well. Because sometimes we may have to adapt the way that we go through and communicate. And on this graph as a part of the report, especially if you do a team report, it's great to see how our natural styles and our adjusted styles will change for our team members. So this is great if you're running a team to understand what the natural communication style is for some of your team members. And it's also important to know, because sometimes as a manager, you may have to adjust the way that you speak with them, the way you give them directions, or the way that you interact with them to try and develop their careers. So what we want to be able to demonstrate here is, what do we have to do in order to adjust our style so that we can bring out the best in the people that we lead? Okay, so in a quick summary, by understanding our communication styles and to improve the way that we communicate with the people that we work with or the people that we live with, it's important to make sure that we have 4 steps in order to get that effective communication going. The first one is to understand the 4 styles of communication that has been expressed through extended disc, understand our own preferred communication style and also our perceived communication style. It's then step 3, it's important to understand how other people communicate as well, and try to identify the communication style that they have, whether they're D, I, S or C, so that we can adjust the way that we naturally communicate to the way they receive the information so that it is effective. So that's a key takeaway from our session today, by being able to understand the different communication styles and then being able to adjust that style so that the other people or the recipient of that communication will be more receptive and be able to be influenced, or to be able to make decisions based on the information we give them. Beth.
So thank you, Kevin. So roundabout now, you should have been using the very quick overview that we gave you of each of the different styles, you probably know someone in your life who will fit into most of those styles. Now, that's not to say that there's anything good or negative, or that one isn't better than the other. They're simply different, and it's really that understanding will help you to communicate better with all these people. So let's have a look at what we've just covered in summary. We looked at a communication overview, which is how and why we communicate and some of the challenges of communication. Then we looked at recognizing the value of knowing our own style of communication and identifying the style of others, because then we can adapt the way that we are communicating so that we have better conversations in 2021. And we also covered a variety of different strategies and tools that you can use. Look, we've shared lots of valuable information with you today, and we want to be able to help you to move forward pretty quickly to implementing some of these strategies for better conversations. So Kevin and I put our heads together and we've come up with a plan for the next step. And I'm wondering if it's okay if I share that with you now. Awesome. I'm going to share this offer. So extended disc is well known. It's proven. We've shown you that. We've given you a quick insight into it. And we want to be able to help you build your understanding of the 4 communication styles and how you can more successfully communicate with them. And our offer that I'm going to speak about to you in a minute includes one-on-one coaching with certified extended disc consultants. Now, Kevin and I are both international award winners for our coaching, and we're both accredited with the International Coaching Federation, and we are certified extended disc consultants. We give you a comprehensive written report, and you will get that as part of this offer. Between us, we've had massive experience, which we'll share with you. We've had massive leadership and business experience, and we gave you a very quick overview of that at the beginning of this webinar. So we've got an offer for you. The first part of it is a starter offer, and this includes an extended disc assessment and report, one 60-minute coaching session to debrief that. And we believe that this will give you a clear insight into your natural state, just who you are and how that influences your communication, and it will give you the opportunity to identify changes you can make for better communication with others. And that's valued at $650, but we don't want you to have to pay that much today. So we've extended this a little bit with what we're calling a master offer. You can either do the starter or the master. So as well as the things that you get in the starter offer, you're also going to get 2 additional 60-minute coaching sessions, one to help you to implement the changes that you need to make. And so that's a bit more raw, and it's really laser focused on where you want to make those changes and how you can make them. And then the second one, about a month later, is to look at reviewing your progress and making sure that you are across things. So the benefits of this is greater clarity of your natural state, improved awareness of those other disc styles, how they perceive you and how they're responding to your style. And it's all about developing strategies for improved engagement with others. You've got to have that, because if you're not developing those strategies, you've got the report and you're not doing anything with it. So it's really important. And finally, we want you to be able to hold yourself accountable as you review your progress. So it's important that we put some of those accountabilities in the way, in place for you, but we also want you to be able to hold yourself accountable. Now, this is valued at $1,650, but you will not have to pay this much today. We've got an absolutely awesome special offer for you today. where what we're doing is offering you the starter for rather than $650, we're offering it to you for $397. So that's the disc assessment and the coaching session to debrief the report. Or we're offering you 1650 value under the master program. Today we're offering it at $997. Now Kevin will actually pop these two links into the chat for you. So if what you do is cut and paste that, you can go through to those links. That will take you through to the PayPal account. It's completely secure. You put your details in there. You choose, there are two different bit.ly links. So you choose those links, you go through, you put the payments, and bingo, you're in. You'll get an email from us, and either Kevin or I will be in contact with you within the next 24 hours so that we can actually get you started. Because what we know from the other clients that we've had earlier in the year, when we did a round of this, what we know is that they want to get started right away. They don't want to be mucking around and taking another 3 weeks to start. So this is very individual, and we will get you started as a matter of urgency. So just looking at that again, the starter offer is 1 extended disc assessment and report and the 60-minute coaching session to debrief it. You can move straight away into the master, which is $1,650 worth of value. Today we're offering it for $997, and that will give you 3 coaching sessions. And you can choose, you can either work with one of us or both of us for these coaching sessions. You'll get that extended disc assessment and the report there. Okay, so let's have a look now at taking your questions. So let's have a look at these questions. We've got a couple of questions here. So Kevin, I'm going to read these out. I'm suggesting that what we do now is put our webcams on so that people can actually see us. Whoop, here I come. Good evening, everyone. It's cold here in Queensland tonight, relatively speaking, in terms of how it is everywhere else. I'm sure it's colder. How is it in Singapore, Kevin?
It's raining outside.
Yeah, we had a great big thunderstorm in the middle of the morning today. It was pretty weird. So, okay, let's have a look at what some of these questions are. Some generations that I'm working with, this is from Sarah, some generations that I'm working with seem to be tied to their mobile devices for most of their life. And that's gotten worse during COVID. In my observation, many of them seem to be unable to read the non-verbal cues. Great point, Sarah. And Sarah's asking, Kevin, do we have any tips for how she could encourage these younger people to learn to read the non-verbal cues?
So I think it's a matter of practice. So the thing is, especially now because of COVID, we don't have the opportunity to do face-to-face meetings. So everything needs to be online through a video conference call. So it's actually quite important for people to have the camera on so that you can actually see what people are saying, how their facial expressions are, how the body languages are going to be. So I think as a manager, if you can encourage your team members to always have the cameras on, that is a pivotal part of looking at non-verbal cues.
Yeah, I also think that it's useful to get people in face-to-face conversations to make sure that you're encouraging them to look at you, Sarah, to actually observe that and maintain that eye contact, but also to perhaps overuse some of those non-verbal cues yourself, and ask the person, what do you think I might be thinking now in response to what you've said. It's a real challenge, and I agree with you. It's about creating the situations where people are forced to acknowledge that the non-verbal cues are actually happening. More and more, get off those mobile devices, get off those telephones, take time off the screens. What I notice amongst younger people particularly is that they're quite hesitant to actually phone someone. They would, or to walk over and see them in a work environment. They find it much easier to simply message them, to text them, or to email them. And I'm really big on that verbal communication. So I hope that helps, Sarah. Thanks. Great question. Roger wants to know, do we have any recommendations or tips that we're able to share, allowing people to navigate difficult conversations, particularly where cultural idiosyncrasies and behaviours might influence the meaning? So, Kevin, what do you think? You've worked across a lot of different nationalities with some of the work that you've done. What are
So
your observations?
I think it's important, regardless of culture, to have direct and honest conversations. So rather than try and fluff it up and trying to use elaborate language, just keep it basic, get the message across quickly, and just be authentic and direct in terms of having those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes people use elaborate words, and English may not be the first language for some people, and that could be a cultural difference that could have an impact in the way that the message is received. So don't use flowery or big words because some people may not understand it. Just be direct, use basic, simple language so that people can absorb it quickly and ask you questions in terms of the message that you are delivering.
Yep, I think it's also important to when you are when you're having those difficult conversations, it's important to deliver. And I love what you say, Kevin. Just be really direct about it. It's also important then, perhaps at the end of making your point, whatever it might be, or when the conversation is coming to a natural pause, to smile, to show there's no hard feelings here. I'm serious about what I've shared with you, but it's, you need to get on and change whatever it might be. But we're good, we're okay. We can continue on from here. It's also a really powerful strategy is to change the topic. So, as I was saying to you before about celebrating the silence, which is a great technique to use while you're waiting for someone to answer the question. But once it appears that you've said all that needs to be said, change the topic or leave the room or put the phone down or whatever it might be, so that you're not leaving this great big silence for the person to continue to process and perhaps to react to whatever it is that you've said to them. Because once we get into that emotional reaction area, things can get a bit hairy. When it's different cultures, Kevin, that's when I think it's even more important to use basic language. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. And I think when you are cross-culture and where maybe English is not the primary language, then it's sometimes good to invite HR to be there so that HR can explain in local language as well, because your HR, who is your business partner, can have that conversation. So as a leader, you just need to be a little bit more cognizant of your surroundings and also the resources that are available to you so that you can be effective in the message that you are delivering.
Yep. I think the other thing too is that it's about timing. You know, in a work situation, it's pretty important to um, to have those conversations um, within a short time frame rather than always saving it up. And I know that many people on the call will do performance appraisals and need to be having those performance conversations, but it can also be really useful to give some of that feedback or have some of those difficult conversations along the way so that it doesn't become such a big deal when you've got to do that performance appraisal. I also think that it's important too to remind people here that um, telling people what they've done right is just as important to share. Doesn't matter about the culture, doesn't but be comfortable sharing with your colleagues or your team that this is what they've done well, and do that in a way that celebrates them, but that also is culturally appropriate. Some people are cool to have lots of fuss made, whereas others want to celebrate in a much tinier way, and that's about different personality types as well as different cultural types. So I think that about sums that up there, Roger. I hope that's been useful for you. Great question, thank you. So I'm just looking here. There's another question here from Vicky, Kevin, that says, what is covered in the 2 additional coaching sessions for the master offer, please?
So your master offer is once you've gone through your debrief, the extra 2 sessions will help you implement. So you will go through to understand how you're going to have to adjust your style, how you're going to implement it, whether it's at work or at home. And then 30 days after that, you'll do a check-in to see how you've implemented the change and how the change is going. So sometimes when people just have a single session, you get the debrief, but what do you do with all that information? So the master package allows you to have an implementation session to plan it out and what actions you're going to take. And then the follow-up 30 days after that is to hold you accountable and see how you progress with that implementation.
Awesome. Okay. Sarah's saying, when can I start? Sarah, as I shared with you earlier, you take the bit.ly link, you click on there, you pay your money, you'll get an email from us and one of us will contact you and get you started within the next 24 hours. So you don't have to wait for other people to sign up. We work with you individually. So Teresa's asking this question, Kevin. Um, will I'm just read a question thing. Will I learn how to manage other people's emotions, especially anger? My manager seems to be angry all the time. Great question.
Well, I think it's more about your manager rather than you. So sometimes when you try to understand what their style is, you can adapt the way that you communicate with them so that the anger doesn't come up. So that can only be effective to a certain degree because sometimes you also have to try and identify what your manager is going to blow up about. So I think by understanding the traits of individuals in terms of whether they fit into the 4 different styles, whether you need to give more information, whether you need to give less information, how you give them personal space, or whether you don't give them personal space, or whether you're just a listener, or whether you have to give them a lot more time. I think
Yeah.
once you understand that, that is helpful. But you also need to understand from a human psychology perspective, what are his buttons? Like, are you pressing his buttons so that he goes off? I think that's also important to understand as well.
Yeah, and I think very much there's an expectation that people manage their emotions um, much more in the workplace than perhaps they did even 10 years ago. Certainly, there's an expectation that we don't have workplace bullying, and that we try and minimize that as much as we possibly can. It doesn't, all of these strategies that are in place don't actually mean that particular people are behaving better. So I agree with what Kevin's saying there, that it's a matter of making sure, firstly, that you're not pressing their buttons. It might be about asking some clarifying questions after you've done some observation. And the first thing would be to observe, when do they seem to be angriest, and what are they actually angry about? So is there something, is there a piece of work that you're doing, or a behavior that the team is doing that appear to be making them angry? Now, it's not suggesting whether that's their anger is right or wrong. It simply is, we're looking to see what we can do to manage and minimize that. So once you've noticed what it is and when it is, you then would be able to work out what are some clarifying questions. What can you go and ask for some feedback? What can we be doing to make sure that we're meeting your needs more appropriately? Those clarifying questions that I gave you earlier in the strategies and tips section, so that you're actually getting a bit of a handle on what's going on. The other thing to be really aware of is that very often people's anger is caused because they are afraid in some way. Perhaps they're getting pressured from above. So some of those things we talked about in terms of recognizing other people's styles, where's their stress coming from? Is there something that you can understand about what's going on for them that makes it easier for you to look at them more sympathetically? I'm not suggesting that you need to tolerate the behaviour, Teresa, but certainly it's about understanding them so that you don't move into a space where you're constantly reacting to their anger, because that will just kind of escalate and it won't be good for anybody. Anything else to add there, Kevin?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Okay, we've got one more question here. I love this question. This is a cracker. Um, this is from Joseph, and Joseph's wanting to know, what are some strategies, or what strategies can you give me for pushing through my happy scared, please? I can't decide whether I'm happy or scared, and I keep running around in circles. So, Kevin, what can you say about that?
Well, I think you kind of need to understand what makes you happy, because once you've identified what makes you happy, then it's easier to know whether you're happy or scared, and where you're running away. And I guess if you are running away, the question to ask is it causing you anxiety? Is it causing you stress? And if it is, then you kind of identified the stress trigger, or the trigger that's going to make you feel scared.
Yeah.
So if you can identify that, your happiness, then you know that's your happy state. And then the ones that give you the blood pressure, the hot heads, or the steam coming out of your ears, then that's going to be your scared or your stress triggers.
Yeah, good point. As I said before, what it really comes down to, Joseph, is labeling, understanding that fear and excitement is the same energy in your body. It's all about how you label it, and it can be as simple as facing down that fear a little bit, and communicating to whoever you're talking to, or whoever is assisting you with the situation that's making you happy scared, to actually communicate with them and let them know that this is how you're feeling. You know, I really encourage my coaching clients to say, well, you know, I'm happy scared. If you're getting into a new relationship, it should be a little bit happy scared. If you're getting into a new business or starting a new job, there's excitement, but you're scared at the same time. And if you can acknowledge that, then you're halfway there in terms of dealing with it. Once you've acknowledged it, then just sit peacefully and have a look at what are some things that I can actually be doing that are going to move me off the spot and stop me from running around in circles not doing very much. I hope that's really useful for you, Joseph. So that's the last question that we have, Kevin. So just a reminder to people, what we've got is the starter offer for you. The starter offer is the extended disc assessment with a report. It's also one 60-minute coaching session to explain your report, and that today you can purchase that for $397, and you're getting over $600 worth of value there. The master includes exactly those things. So the extended disc assessment and the report, the 1 hour to explain and debrief you on your report, and it has 2 additional coaching sessions. One to help you to identify and implement changes in both your personal or your working life. It's up to you what you would choose that in. And the second session, 30 days later, is to help you to review your progress so that you're holding yourself accountable. And that is over $1,600 worth of value. And tonight we're offering you that for $997. So click on those 2 links there. And we look forward to working with you. We know from our past clients that this has made a huge difference in their lives. So we look forward to welcoming some of you on board with that. So, Kevin, before we close for the evening, is there anything you would like to finish with?
I think just remember that communication is a basic human need. And when we master the communication styles that we have and how we address it to the recipient of our communication and messaging, then we'll be more successful.
Thank you, Kevin. We look forward to working with you, to helping you have better conversations in 2021. Thank you so much for giving your time to us tonight to listen to us as we shared an overview of communication, some strategies and some tips for you, and some increased awareness. We would love to work with you in either our starter or our master program. If you've got any questions, you can email me and we'll get back to you. You can check out both Kevin and myself on our LinkedIn profiles, which we've got there for you. Thank you very much for your time. Good night.
Bye, everyone.